Hi, it's John, and welcome to the channel, 6:17 a.m., Sunday, October the 19th. I hope you're having a great start to your Sunday morning and a great weekend as well, as I tip my big blue mug of coffee to you today. And what I want to do today is I want to look at a controversy that's bubbled up over the last couple of days regarding Pierre Poilievre and something he said on the Northern Perspective podcast on YouTube. And folks, this is going to be a story that's going to lead the news for God knows how long. Expect this. Expect in the House of Commons for the Liberals, the NDP, probably the Bloc Québécois, to call for Pierre Poilievre to resign his position as a leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. He's undermining the integrity of the Prime Minister's office, the Canadian government, and undermining the authority of the RCMP with what he said on the Northern Perspective podcast. And that's going to happen. Taking away the focus, which should be on the absolute dumpster fire that is Canada right now, caused by Mark Carney and the Liberal Party. And this is where I've got a bit of a problem with what Pierre Poilievre said here. For the most part, I agree with him, but I think there's a bit of an own goal here. And I think Conservatives need to learn from this as well. I think a lot of us are focusing in the wrong place, which I'll get to in just a moment. The other things I want to get to here, which is why you come here, a little different way of looking at things, is the absolute sheer hypocrisy of the Liberal Party, the NDP, and a warning I had about something like this happening back on August the 18th, which is a pretty significant day in Canadian political history, which I'll talk about in just a moment. Here's Pierre Poilievre on the Northern Perspective podcast, 38 seconds.
Many of the scandals of the Trudeau era should have been involved jail time. I mean, Trudeau broke the criminal code when he took a free vacation from someone with whom he had government business. It's just like it's right there in the criminal code. If the RCMP had been doing its job and not covering up for him, then he would have been criminally charged. And again, he probably violated the criminal code in the SNC-Lavalin scandal. These would normally have led to criminal charges, but of course the RCMP covered it all up, and the leadership of the RCMP is frankly just despicable when it comes to enforcing laws against the Liberal government.
Just a little advice to Northern Perspective. Put your logo on the screen up in the top left-hand corner proudly, because you did the work here, and the mainstream media does not want to give you credit for this. They're begrudgingly giving you credit if they give you credit at all. They just call you a podcaster, and you need the credit for it. Good job here. But I do think that Pierre Poilievre is right. I think somebody should go to jail. If you steal money from the Canadian taxpayer, somebody should pay for it. I think he might be a little off base when it comes to the RCMP. I'm not a lawyer. I did go back and look at some committee meetings regarding the SNC-Lavalin affair and what happened with Jody Wilson-Raybould. The Conservatives call it obstruction. The RCMP basically said their hands were tied because the Prime Minister's office wouldn't hand over documents. I don't know whether the Prime Minister's office and the Prime Minister has that privilege to do that and withhold that information. I'm not a lawyer. He could be right. But are they covering up for Justin Trudeau? I don't know. Of course, this has become a bigger story because Dimitri Soudis, who used to be a senior aide to Stephen Harper, wrote an article in the Toronto Star. This is the best I could do. I don't subscribe to the Star behind a paywall. Pierre Poilievre dismantling the principled, trustworthy Conservative Party we tried to build. This is what you're going to hear this week. Poilievre giving ammunition to the left about this. Bringing this up now, I don't understand why. I'm glad that he's honest with us, and I agree with him. And then there's this. The Watcher puts, you left the part out where he abandoned Stephen Harper and the Conservative Party for the nookie. This is Dimitri Soudis right here. Buys Liberal membership ahead of Eve Adams' nomination vote. This is his babe here. By the way, he didn't abandon Stephen Harper. Stephen Harper fired him. And this is Anna Tamala. This article does not reflect former Prime Minister Harper's views. Mr. Soudis does not speak on behalf of Mr. Harper. But let's expand on this a little bit. Let's expand on this. Poilievre, in that clip I showed you, talked about the Aga Khan situation. Mentioned SNC-Lavalin. What about the Green Slush Fund? Just for another one. There's the We Charity. There's Arrive Can as well. But let's talk about the Green Slush Fund. We'll just use that one. What was it? $400 million? That the Liberals, in whole or in part, allegedly funneled to Liberal-friendly companies and friends. Conservatives wanted documents on this because it's the Canadian taxpayers' money, your money. The Liberals wouldn't hand over the documents. And basically at this time last year, government was handcuffed and couldn't do anything and didn't get anything done because of this issue. $400 million of your money, poof, into the ether, and we don't know where it is. And nobody's been held responsible for this. Then we went away on Christmas vacation on December 19th. January 6th, Trudeau comes out and resigns, throwing the Liberal Party into a leadership race. We've got a leadership race until we choose Mark Carney as the next prime minister. We go into an election, and all year long, I think we've only got 73 days of government, and we still don't know what happened with the $400 million. This is money that's been robbed from you. Should somebody not go to jail for this? Now let's look at the hypocrisy, and then I'm going to get to my warning back on our August 18th. By the way, August 18th, just to let you know, was the day, and I did this in the morning, of the by-election in Battle River Crowfoot that Pierre Poilievre won. So I'm going to get to that in just a moment. So let's look at the hypocrisy of the left, the Liberals, and the NDP as well. And I'm going to get to one guy in just a moment who's actually in Carney's cabinet right now, who says absolutely nothing about the theft of hundreds of millions of your dollars. Yet 13, 14 years ago, he made a huge issue of something that cost less than $20. So let's go back a few years, and some of you will know who Bev Oda is. Former Conservative Party member, appointed Minister for International Cooperation August 14, 2007. On July 3, 2012, Oda announced she was resigning her seat in the House of Commons effective at the end of the month following public controversy about her spending habits. She was dropped from cabinet the following day. I had to go back and look at this again. There was one thing I remembered about this, but there were other things that Bev Oda did. She went to England, ran up huge limousine bills, changed hotels which cost Canadian taxpayers money, apologized for it, paid it all back, but she had to resign. The Liberals made a huge issue out of this, and you know where this is going. This became a national issue, and people still talk about this to this day. Now look at the look on this guy's face, grilling Bev Oda about $16 in orange juice.
I mean, let's just stay candid for a second. You've got to regret ordering a $16 orange juice, no?
Not at all. Not at all. I have been working hard. I arrived in London, was very late. I was working on a speech I was to give the next morning. But you know, that cost of the orange juice was not maybe the appropriate expense for the government to pay. I've repaid that cost, and I have apologized for it. Evan and I would hope that, you know, we can all move on. I can move on. Be proud of the work that I've done, to have Canadians be proud of Canada's position in helping the world's most vulnerable people. And
but that's the problem in politics. Does it overshadow the legacy? I mean, you did all that work. You're a minister for CETA, and then at the end of your career, and again, we've spoken a lot. People are talking about limousines, $16 orange juice, in the Savoy Hotel. I mean, I guess my question is, was that
So this is Evan Solomon, folks, grilling Bev Oda about $16 in orange juice. Doesn't give a damn these days about the Green Slush Fund, SNC-Lavalin, Arrive Can, We Charity, Aga Khan, hundreds of millions of dollars. Here he is.
Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario. That'll have Evan Solomon.
The Honourable Evan Solomon, Minister of Artificial Intelligence and Digital Innovation, and Minister responsible for the Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario.
Where are you, Mr. Solomon, when it comes to the hundreds of millions of dollars the party that you support and are now part of rips off the Canadian people to hundreds of millions of dollars? Don't you think somebody should go to jail for this, Mr. Solomon? And speaking of going to jail, you know who Charlie Angus is. He didn't run in the last election, but he's been an NDPer for years. The government that he supported under Jagmeet Singh virtually said nothing through a lot of these transgressions and this theft of Canadian people. Here he is, going back, I think, 13 to 14 years in the House of Commons. Listen to what he says here. I'll play it twice for you so you can hear it.
In the private sector, and you repeatedly covered up your documents and misrepresented your spending, you'd get fired or they'd call the cops. But
what did he say there? Let's hear that again.
In the private sector, and you repeatedly covered up your documents and misrepresented your spending, you'd get fired or they'd call the cops. But
This is what he's talking about, the Bevoda affair. Where were you, Mr. Angus, when the Liberals were ripping off the Canadian people with millions to hundreds of millions of dollars, allegedly? The hypocrisy here it just drips in hypocrisy. Now, I want to take you back. There's a pattern here, folks. This is the beginning of what I started talking about on August the 18th. I'm going to play a clip here for you. Again, this is going to be a huge issue. They're going to call for Poilievre's resignation this week. It's coming, folks. And this is what I said way back on August the 18th. I was in pretty beat up shape at this point, so I'm kind of twisted into my seat here. I was up in my kitchen. But this is what I had to say. Moving forward, we need Poilievre back in the House of Commons. If you've seen him in question period, I think he's the best there is. He has the support of most of his caucus, but his leadership will come up for review in January, and there are dark forces that will try to see him ousted. And just to give you an idea, Mark Carney today will be meeting with his good friend, Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who was not a friend of Pierre Poilievre in the election campaign. I think he was detrimental to Poilievre. And I think Doug Ford would love to replace Poilievre as Conservative leader, and I think Mark Carney would like to help him do that. I don't think Alberta would support Doug Ford at all. We see him as a Liberal. But the knives are out for Pierre Poilievre, and it's really going to start this week, folks. It's going to start this week. Now, I want to take you over to this. I don't want this video to go on forever, but this is amazing. So here is City News, and as you can see at the bottom of the screen, they're talking about the interview with Northern Perspective. Poilievre calls RCMP leadership despicable during podcast interview. See, they don't say Northern Perspective there. So she's going to throw to a reporter to talk about this issue. But instead of talking about this issue, I'm going to play the whole thing for you. He goes on for 90 seconds linking Pierre Poilievre to Donald Trump. This is how it goes in the mainstream media.
Joining us now is our Parliament Hill correspondent Glenn McGregor in Ottawa. Glenn, Poilievre is now not just questioning Trudeau, but the RCMP.
Yeah, this is sort of an interesting development. I think we've got to, before we talk about this, let's rewind the tape a little bit here, Faiza, back to the election campaign. Remember, Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leader, was put in sort of an awkward position because he had to really disavow Trump, which has suddenly become the U.S. Canada's relationship with the United States, and the tariffs that Trump had imposed became the dominant issue and allowed Mark Carney to win the election campaign. Since then, there's been an expectation that Poilievre might pivot his tone. He might try and take some of the rough edges off, present sort of a more amenable, nicer, open tone, and back away from some of the comparisons that some people have made to his policies and, crucially, his style to Donald Trump. Poilievre has disavowed that. He says, listen, I'm nothing like Donald Trump. He's rejected this Maple MAGA label that some people have put on him. But in the recent weeks, he really seems to be leaning in, at least stylistically and to a certain extent on policy, of some of the things that Donald Trump has done. He has called for, and his party has called for, an end to birthright citizenship. That is, people who were born to foreign nationals but born on Canadian soil automatically get Canadian citizenship. That's something that Donald Trump eliminated, and he tried to eliminate in the United States. There's still a constitutional challenge of it almost immediately after his inauguration. Now, Poilievre is pushing the same policy. Poilievre also tweeting out something this week about diversity, equity, inclusion, saying it has to stop. This was a major issue for Donald Trump, especially with the universities in the United States going after them, threatening to cut off funding if they used any of the money to support DEI programs or DEI-related staff in their universities. Now Poilievre saying he'd like to do that. And now he's basically advancing this theory about, during a podcast interview that he did recently, about the RCMP, alleging that they are essentially covering up for past Liberal governments. Listen.
It took him 90 seconds to get to the actual issue that he's supposed to talk about. And he spent most of that talking about linking Pierre Poilievre to Donald Trump. This is how it's going to work, folks. And Poilievre, watch out. Watch your back, pal. And Conservatives, hold strong on this. Pierre Poilievre's a good leader. I still think he might be the Prime Minister of the country in the future. But this is how it goes, folks. He's got a leadership review coming up in January, and they're out after him right now. And I'm sure that the Liberal Party, probably Doug Ford, are trying to undermine him right now. But look at how all of this stuff, from one thing leading to another here. I also think there's something we can learn as conservatives from this. I think this is a bit of an own goal from Pierre Poilievre. I think he's telling the truth. I respect him for doing that, but it gives ammunition to the other side, and this will be the issue we'll hear about for weeks now, if not months. I also think conservatives need to learn that maybe we shouldn't focus so much on things like Justin Trudeau going out on a boat or dating Katy Perry. It's just rather petty. The left mocks us because of it, and I think some ways they're right. I don't care who the guy dates. I'm glad he's gone. We cannot ignore what he did for 10 years in this country and how dysfunctional it is because of him, how divided it is because of him. But focus on what's important. I think that's important. Let me know what you think. If you like the video, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications, and I'll see you in the next one.